Well, good morning again. We are continuing our series today titled Advent Aftermath. Yes, Advent Aftermath. What the goal of this series is to kind of take a look and say, okay, during Advent, we talk about all the kind of flowery kind of Jesus coming, like just we celebrate the nativity. But then we often forget many of the scriptures that follow in the young life of Jesus. And so what we're trying to do here is follow the life of Jesus after the birth of Jesus. And so we talked 2 weeks ago about Jesus being dedicated at the temple. And today we are talking about the story of the wise men. How many of you guys have heard of the story of the wise men before, or the Magi, or whatever, however, the kings, whatever you've heard them called? So it's in Matthew 2, 1 through 12. If you have a Bible, you can look it up there. We'll also have it on the screen. So here it is. We're going to just go through it verse by verse, and I'll kind of expand a little bit as we go. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem. Now, we're just going to pause there, leave that slide up. In the time period it's telling us is that after Jesus was born. So sometime after Jesus was born, we're told it is the time of Herod. And so this is important. This is one of the leaders of the time. So it's important that we recognize this particular individual was in power. Where did they come from? They came from the east. It's important to recognize that this is probably the area which is now known as Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Yemen. Somewhere in that particular region is where these particular individuals are coming from. And the Magi. Who are the Magi? Great question. The Magi, the name given by the Babylonians, Medes, Persians, and others to the wise men, teachers, priests, physicians, astrologers, seers, interpreters of dreams, prophets, and sorcerers. Pretty much what we mean by this is, who knows? No, it could be a lot of different things, right? Like they could kind of be these like fortune-telling gentlemen, or they could be these teachers and wise men, or physicians even, or priests within their own culture. They could wear multiple hats, and they could be multiple of these. So the Magi could be anything from mystical astrologers to teachers, or just about anything in between. But ultimately, we know they probably have a position of influence, a position of power, a position of significance within their culture. And now they are coming to see Jesus. And so here's what happens next. The Magi asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." They arrived and are asking around very publicly, "Where is the King of the Jews?" The star they saw, they believe this means that the king has come. Now, really important. In the ancient world, the sky is always telling a story, okay? This is very important. In the ancient world, the sky is always telling a story. A star is not just a star. It contains meaning and purpose. An example is in 44 BC, so this is just shortly before Jesus, Julius Caesar was assassinated, and shortly after his death, there was a comet that appeared for 7 days. And the ancients interpreted this as the deification of Julius Caesar. That the sky was declaring Caesar is God or Caesar is Lord. The comet is called Caesar's Comet. You can Google it and see it. It's a real thing. It's Caesar's Comet. They even printed coins with Caesar on one side and the comet on the other side. The sky told a story in the ancient world. There was always meaning attached to the sky. So when the Magi see a star in the sky, what do they think they're seeing? Something with significant meaning. And in this particular case, they think they're seeing something connected to this King of the Jews. And the question becomes from us, like, okay, so what are they actually looking at? Are they looking at a star that's in the sky? Are they looking at a comet? What are they looking at? Well, here's 4 theories of what they're seeing. And there's probably more than this, but we'll just go through 4 popular theories. So when it says his star, what's it pointing to? Well, one would be Halley's Comet or Halley's Comet, depending upon how you want to pronounce that. This has been one theory, but the nearest appearance would have been 11 BC that we can chart, which many believe would have been far too early to actually have been near the birth of Christ. So while this is an option, it's a kind of unlikely option. The next is a supernova. This is an exploding star that suddenly fills the sky with light in a brilliant, blinding flash. And these are kind of unpredictable and very rare. And there's no real record of a supernova in the years surrounding the birth of Christ. And we can kind of assume that if there had been a supernova, if there had been something like this, that it probably would have been documented because, again, in this particular culture, the sky is always telling a story, and we're going to document that if it happens. And so it doesn't seem like that took place. The most popular theory is in 7 BC, Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn came into alignment. And that happens like every 125 years. And that could have been like a conjunction of the planets. There was also a conjunction of Jupiter and Venus in 2 BC, which could potentially be an explanation of what they were seeing. And a conjunction would explain why the Magi saw the star and the Israelites did not see the star. Because a couple things. Conjunctions don't attract as much attention from just your general populace because they're not necessarily watching the skies as intently as the Magi might have been. They're kind of not as highly visible a phenomena, if you will. And so they might not have noticed it or they might not have seen it. And then finally, it's supernatural. It's just a supernatural light, right? We can't rule out the fact that God might have placed a supernatural light in the sky for the Magi to see and be inspired by and therefore to follow the light. Now, those are 4 potential options of the star. Could be any one of those, but ultimately they're following this particular light that is in the sky, and it's very meaningful to them. And so here's what happens next. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Israel with him. Now, King Herod hears that the Magi are looking for a new king. Herod is disturbed. When Herod is disturbed, all of Israel is disturbed. That's the way to read that, okay? When Herod is disturbed, everyone's disturbed. Now, why would a powerful tyrant leader be disturbed when he hears about a new king that has been born? Because a new king has been born, someone who can potentially take his throne, especially if he is the king of the Jews, because right now he is the oppressive force kind of occupying the Jewish people. And so how is he to take this idea that a king has been born to these people that he is actively oppressing and actively occupying? Yeah, that would be a little concerning if you're the leader that is occupying that particular group, to hear that there's this person that represents freedom, this Messiah that has been born to them. And so immediately Herod gets very kind of probably scared. I mean, you can see a history of paranoia throughout all of the leaders within Roman culture. And so he's paranoid, and here's what happens. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. So what Herod's kind of first step is, I need to get a meeting of the Sanhedrin together. So these are all the Pharisees and Sadducees, the teachers of the law, the people that Jesus later in his ministry is kind of consistently arguing with and kind of sharing his way of seeing God very different than theirs. Well, he gets all these people together who are kind of the leaders within the Israel culture. He pulls them together and says, so tell me about the prophecy of this Messiah that's supposed to come and be the king of the Jews. Like, where is he supposed to be coming from? Like, where is he supposed to be born? Because he knows for them, the prophetic culture is very important. And so here's what they report back to Herod. In Bethlehem in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. So the Pharisees and Sadducees provide Herod what they know about the location of where this Messiah is to come from, and then Herod leaves. The next thing Herod does is it says, then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. So it seems as if Herod knows these Magi are going around trying to find out where Jesus is coming from, but they don't necessarily have the information that he has, which is that it looks like it's over here in this particular area of Bethlehem. So he brings them together and he asks them what they know, kind of doing some recon, putting together some pieces of this information. This is interesting when you think about it this way, right? There's all these different narratives happening around the birth of Jesus, all these different power struggles kind of happening. He's like, I talked to the Sanhedrin, now I want to talk to the Magi. I want to kind of get a picture to put all together what's happening with this new king and who he might be. Because again, he needs to find out what time the star exactly appeared, where it appeared, because the sky is always telling a story. Not just for the Magi, but for the Israelites and for the Roman culture. The sky is always telling a story. So he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him. So Herod points the Magi toward Bethlehem, says, that's the direction you would want to go, toward Bethlehem. He then tells them to go find him, like go find Jesus, go find this new king that's been born. He doesn't know it's Jesus, but he's like, go find the Messiah. But report back to me what you find so I can worship the new king as well, right? And you're sitting here, you already know how the story goes. So all of you guys kind of got grins like, yeah, right, of course that's what he wants. But this is his kind of slick way of saying, okay, how can I manipulate this situation for my well-being? Likely he wants to kill the new king, or at the very least suppress his power, ensure that it's never going to lead in a revolt. So what happens next is, after the Magi, so they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. So the star is visible again, or still. That's really the way of saying it. Now, this kind of again lets us know it could be a planetary alignment, because due to their location changing, that could have had some impact on when they were able to see it, where they were able to see it, and also potentially just due to the fact that they would have needed to be actively looking for it. So anyway, they see it again, and it's right above the place where the child is. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. So when they saw it again, so it seems like there was a point where they didn't see it, and now they're seeing it again. Okay, on coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. The Magi worshiped. They bowed down. They saw Jesus as a king worthy of worship. Because in their value system, again, even if they don't believe in the Jewish story, even if they don't believe in the Old Testament, even if they're like, that's an interesting book, the sky is always telling a story, and the story was that this is a king worthy of worship, and so they come and they bow down, and they are worshiping this king. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They didn't just worship, they brought gifts. Now, first, how many kings, how many wise men, how many magi do you each have in your beautiful nativity sets? 3, right? I mean, most of us have 3, okay? And the truth is, we don't know. Up to this point, it's only said magi. It's only said wise men. It hasn't said how many. We kind of deduce that there were 3 because there's 3 gifts. It could be that there were 2 that brought 3 gifts. It could be that there were 10 that brought 3 gifts. We don't know how many there actually was. The assumption is 3 and 3 because the 3 gifts, right? Each of them bringing a gift. But ultimately, we should be careful to read that into it. This could be a caravan, if you will. The other thing is, this isn't likely happening at the nativity scene. The earliest we can argue that this is actually happening is at least 41 days after Jesus' birth. And it's actually more likely that it's later, like between 41 days and 2 years old is kind of what most historians are arguing that they would have actually visited, probably closer to 2 years old. So I hate to break up the nativity scene that's so beautiful that you sit out every year, but it's likely that the wise men you should maybe like set them in the, like if you set your like nativity scene in the living room, like you should set your wise men like way off to the other room, still searching for the nativity, all right? I don't know, but ultimately that's kind of historically what's happening here. They're still searching, they're still looking at that particular point. So they bring these gifts though to Jesus, which I think is very interesting. These gifts would have been of immense value. I think it's really important that we pause and we remember Joseph and Mary are on their own. Okay, if we go back to the origin story, they got married in a way that would have brought a lot of shame onto their family. And ultimately, they get disowned by their family is kind of what we can deduce from the story. And they're on their own. They're not only on their own, they have to then give birth in a cave with other animals around, pretty much a modern day stable they're giving birth in. They don't have a whole lot of money, we can kind of tell from the story. And here they're brought 3 incredibly valuable gifts, really valuable for their particular position. This would be like winning the lottery. I don't really know how else to say it. They must have been amazed by these gifts. And by the way, these gifts will be very important for next week and for what transpires in the story of Jesus next week. And here's how it goes after they spend some time with Jesus and they give the gifts. Here's what happens next. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they return to their country by another route. The sky tells a story, but so do dreams. Dreams tell a story. And Joseph even had a dream about taking Mary as his wife, which changed the course of his life and their life. Dreams had a lot of meaning in this particular culture, in the ancient world, and it definitely would have had a lot of meaning for the Magi. And so the Magi had some kind of dream. It doesn't really say what the dream was. It just said the dream was a warning to not go inform Herod. And so instead of taking the information they had gained and going back and telling Herod about all they had learned about Jesus, they chose to go another route and kind of go back to their country of origin without notifying Herod, which, by the way, is a big risk on their part. This is a very powerful person. This is a rebellious thing to do, to not go back to this individual who has commissioned you to get this intel and come back. I think we need to recognize that what the Magi are doing here is a pretty big risk. So I think this is an interesting story. Next week, we'll see, I think, why this story is so significant, because we see what Herod does after he finds out he was outwitted by the Magi. We'll see why these goods are so important for Jesus' family to have at this particular time in history. And we'll see how Jesus becomes a refugee. It's an interesting story next week, okay? But from this particular story, here's some things I think we can pull. God provided signs pointing toward Jesus. Dreams, a star, and I think God is still providing signs for us that point us toward Jesus. Whether that is literally toward a community of faith that will teach us about Jesus, or whether that is toward a life lived that hopefully looks more like Jesus each day. Also, God provided encouragement to Mary and Joseph. I think we can really overlook this point. I talked about this 2 weeks ago when we were talking about Jesus being presented at the temple and how encouraging it must have been for Mary and Joseph. But I think it's important for us to remember, Mary and Joseph are likely teenagers. Mary's probably 14, 15 years old. Joseph maybe 15, 16. They're likely not even adults within our particular culture, the way we would see adults being 18. They are likely not at that mark yet. How terrifying must it be to be a parent? I know I was terrified, and I was an adult within our culture. I was, 24 maybe, 25. Okay, my wife's telling me how old I was at the time we had children. But it was terrifying at 25, and I felt like I had, far more of my life probably together than Mary and Joseph and their particular culture, and I had a family support system. They must be terrified. And then they're told that, hey, so this child that you're raising is actually the Messiah. Oh, great. As if I needed more pressure, right? I already had enough pressure of raising a child. Now I have to raise the Messiah. Oh, good. But the thing is they go to the temple and they get this confirmation, and it seems like it really encourages them. And it seems like God knows, wow, they need some more confirmation right now. And these wise men come and worship, and how amazing would it be in their particular context to have these Magi come and bow before Jesus and worship Jesus. That would be another source of confirmation and encouragement for Mary and Joseph, which I think so often we can get hung up on the gifts, which are important, the provision in that way, but God is also providing an encouragement. You got this. Like what you're doing matters. What you're doing is significant. And I hope you know that no matter what you're struggling with, no matter what you're dealing with, no matter what your doubt is, no matter what your despair even is, I think God is speaking into it like, I'm here with you. I have a plan and a purpose for you. Be encouraged. And then finally, it is true. God provides for Mary and Joseph's financial needs. And again, next week we'll see how important this is within their journey. But I believe God is still providing for our needs today. And so this story about these Magi isn't just this story about these three kings that we sing songs about over the season of Advent. I think it has significance in telling us who God is and how God interacts even in our lives still today. The Advent aftermath reminds us of who God is pointing us toward, Jesus, and how Jesus can transform our reality. Let's pray. Good and gracious God, we thank you for the story of these Magi, these kings, these prophets, these even fortune tellers, astronomers, astrologists. Who knows who they were. But God, we are so thankful that they were faithful to follow this light and ultimately be led to the light, Jesus. God, lead us toward the light in our life. Point us toward what it looks like to live in a way of the fruits of the Spirit, God. That we would be open to love, that we would be open to patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness. God, that self-control would be our life's motto, God, that you would just birth within us kindness. God, guide us toward the fruits, that light may even burst out of us, that we may be a light unto others. God, we thank you for this story, for some of the details even that maybe we missed if we've read it before or we've heard about it before. God, we thank you that your word is always speaking something new to us. There's always something revealed about your character that we maybe missed the first time through, and that's your Spirit at work. So continue to be at work through this series. Continue to show us what we can even learn about your character through the childhood of Jesus. God, give us a blessed week. Be with us this week as we maybe do have things that we need to be encouraged about. Maybe there's things that we're dealing with in our life that are super heavy. God, remind us that you have a plan for us, that you're with us, that we're not alone. Encourage us in the ways that only you can encourage us. You know what those are. And so, God, make yourself known in ways that would be an encouragement to us. And if there's people here who have needs, legitimate needs, that they don't even know how they're going to be met, God, I pray that you would provide for those needs or send someone to provide. Maybe there's someone who needs to come along and bring some gifts. But maybe that gift is just the gift of presence, like being present. Maybe our need is that we're lonely and we need someone to be with us. God, whatever our needs are, you know what they are. And so we pray that this week you would meet those needs and that we would feel your presence through that, God. We thank you that you provide for us. And we thank you that you've provided Jesus for us. In the name of Jesus, amen.